this countdown, we have the photographic evidence. A couple of years ago, a man named Edward came forward claiming that he was a time traveler from the year 5000. He even came with evidence. Now, he used a fake name and had his identity hidden so people weren't gonna come after him. So according to Edward, he claims he was part of a top secret experiment that took place in 2004. During the test, he was successfully transported in time. He was taken to LA 5,000 years in the future, and it's not looking too good. He said, and I quote, "I was standing on a huge wooden platform, and after I realized it was the same city, Los Angeles, but underwater." This man's claims were backed up with evidence. He took a photo of LA underwater. I don't even know what to think. Either he's good at Photoshop or he's actually a time traveler. I just thought that the water would be way more polluted than that. Like, that's far too clear, you know? It's a little sketchy. In our 9th spot, we have Vladimir Putin. Turns out that the president of Russia is a time traveler. Take a look at these photos. First, we got a Russian soldier from 1920, and he looks identical to Putin. Then we have another Russian soldier from 1941, and he also looks like a young Putin, who is pictured on the far right. Too eerie. Either he's immortal, or he's a time traveler. Moving on, at number 8, we have the TikTok time traveler. Now, I talked about this case briefly before, and I'm throwing it on today's list because it's the most recent case of time travel. Basically, a guy named Javier claims that he is a time traveler who is now stuck in the year 2027. The scariest part is that the entire human race is wiped out by then. On his TikTok page, he posts videos of him wandering the streets of Spain alone. He has gone to stadiums, airports, police stations, hospitals, restaurants, and malls. No one is there except himself, which is crazy because normally those places would be packed with people, but they aren't. So here's the thing. Either he's a time traveler and was sent to the future to warn us, or he's somehow faking it. But a number of people have analyzed his videos. Some people believe he edits everyone out of the video. Sure, it's possible to edit objects and people out of videos, but it's harder to do with multiple people in the shot, in which there would be, and it's harder if the people are moving around, which they would be. Another theory is that these videos were pre-filmed, that they were filmed during the pandemic when they were under lockdown and had a curfew. But in order to prove that that's not the case, he gets his followers to tell him where he should go next. He then will go to that specific place and prove no one is there. The freakiest part is he has gone to hospitals. If this was filmed during the pandemic, the hospitals would be filled with people. But when he walks around, no one, and I mean no one, is there. Maybe this is real and we should take him seriously. Who knows, but believe what you want to believe. In our 7th spot, we have the 800-year-old cell phone. In 2016, a group of researchers unearthed an ancient-looking cell phone in Austria. The phone is covered in cuneiform writing, which dates back to thousands of years ago, making this object thousands of years old. But obviously, we didn't have phones back then, when this clearly looks like it was modeled after a Nokia phone. Alien hunters believe that it comes from an advanced civilization that has come to Earth. Others believe that this object is proof of time travel. What's even more weird is that I can't seem to find much about this phone online, so it looks like no one has debunked it yet. Maybe it's real then, who knows? In our 6th spot, we have the man named Noah. Back in 2018, a man came forward claiming that he was a time traveler from the year 2030. He called himself Noah. Obviously, it's not his real name, and he sat down for a television interview to share with the world what life is like in 2030. But of course, his face and voice were distorted to protect his identity. He said that he can't let anyone know who he really is. Basically, he said that he will be killed for speaking the truth about time travel. He goes on to prove that he's a real time traveler by getting an x-ray of his hand. Upon doing so, it's revealed that there's a weird device implemented in his wrist. That's what Noah says is what helps him when he time travels. Not only that, but he underwent a lie detector test and he passed it, showing that his claims were real. Now, what did he say is in store for the future? Well, since this occurred in 2018, he said that in 2019 it will be filled with more UFO sightings, which, yes, that was true. He also claims that in 2028, that's when aliens will come down to Earth, and that's also the year that the government will reveal that time travel is real. That's pretty intense if you ask me. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Antikythera mechanism. In 1900s, a team of divers exploring the Greek island of Antikythera made a fascinating discovery. They came across an ancient shipwreck. The ship was filled with statues, jewelry, coins, pottery, you name it. They were all like, booyah, jackpot. As they continued searching the ship though, they came across this weird object. It was a blob of corroded bronze and wood. 2 years later, an archaeologist decided to examine this and discovered it was an astronomical clock. But the items came from ancient Greece and clocks hadn't been invented then. This item was in similar size to a mantle clock, and the bits of wood fragments on it suggest that it was probably in a wooden case. They also believe the case would have had like a circular face or rotating hands. There was also a knob on the side, and the mechanism could rotate forwards and backwards. Needless to say, it was a fairly complex object for that time period, so some believe that it was left by a time traveler. If not, then what could this device be, and how come it was so advanced for its time? In our fourth spot, we have the year 3207.
Quote was time machine. They took me to a room filled by many kinds of displays, gadgets, wires that I had never ever seen. The head of project came to me and told all about that mystical project.
A couple of years ago, an unidentified Greek man came forward saying that he traveled in time to the year 3207. He claims that he was shot forward in time and spent 2 days in the year 3207 as part of a top secret military program. He was paid $100,000 to do so.
That after some minutes they would send me to the year 3207. As I understood, I was kinda laboratory mouse for them, But the money and career that I was suggested were worthy for it.
He claims that in the future, the buildings were massive, triple the size that they are today. He also says that there were flying cars and that there was strange colored grass. It wasn't green, but a deep purple. And lastly, he said that aliens, humans, big animals, and robots were all walking together down the street. That's pretty interesting, not gonna lie. Don't know if I believe that guy, but some people do. I mean, he also showed photographic evidence, but claims that the photos got a bit distorted while going through the whole time travel process. To me, they kind of just look like bad Photoshop, but you decide. In our third spot, we have Paul Dinick. Now, if you haven't heard about this case before, then you're in for a shock. In 1921, a man named Paul Dinick, a Swiss-Australian teacher, slipped into a coma for about a year. For that year, he claimed that he went to the year 3096, where he switched consciousness with a man named Andrew Northman. One minute he was in a coma, next he's inside Andrew's body speaking a foreign language. For that year, he was living as Andrew. Paul was so scared to tell anyone of this experience, so he just wrote it in his diary and kept it a secret. However, just before he passed away, he gave his diary to one of his students to translate, and that's when it was revealed that he had somehow time traveled to the future. It's pretty insane. Could he be telling the truth, or was it all just a coma dream? In our second spot, we have the time-traveling murderer. Okay, this next story is going to leave you baffled. Back in 2014, a woman was found dead in London. It was clearly a murder. Thankfully, her attacker's DNA was found all over her body. Upon doing a forensics test, they got a match. But here's the thing, the supposed attacker was found dead a full 3 weeks before her victim. So how is it possible for her to kill someone when she had already died? So people think that the killer was a time traveler, and that days before her own death, she went a couple weeks into the future to kill this woman. I don't even know. It's just an insane case, if you ask me. And in our number 1 spot today, we had the London Hammer. Back in 1936 Texas, a man named Max Hahn and his wife were out for a walk when they stumbled upon this odd rock with a tool sticking directly out of it. This is what is now called the London Hammer, or the London Artifact. It was discovered to be part of a hammer that was trapped inside a rock that dates back to being over 400 million years old. Clearly back then they did not have hammers, so how the heck did a modern day human-made tool date back to a time where humans weren't even around? Theory goes that it was dropped by a time traveler, but I want to know who would go that far back in time. But let me know in the comments below, would you rather travel to the past or the future?
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Moberly-Jourdain incident. This is one of the most famous cases of possible time travel, but it also might just be a ghost story? I don't know. I'm not here to tell you what to think, so I'll just tell you the story and let you decide for yourself. In 1901, two professors from St. Hugh's College in Oxford, England, went to take a little visit to the Palace of Versailles, which if you didn't know was the French royal home until the monarchy was abolished in 1792. That means that this was once the home of Marie Antoinette, and she was one of the last royals to live there before she was executed in 1793. So, on this visit in 1901 by these two professors, they're just walking around, seeing the sights, enjoying their time. As they're checking out the private retreat built for Marie Antoinette by her husband Louis XVI, boom! Out of nowhere, these two just see the Marie Antoinette sitting there, sketching away, dressed in 1780s attire. But not only her, there were a bunch of people also dressed in this same sort of way who seemingly just appeared out of nowhere. Just as quickly as they appeared, however, once the tour guide approached the two professors, all of the people vanished. The pair ended up writing a book about their experience, which was quite successful because of how grounded it seemed. Did they travel through time? Did they see ghosts? Or is this all just made up? In our number 9 spot today, we have the bookstore. In 1996, a man and his wife were out in Liverpool doing a bit of shopping. The man's wife went into a bookstore, and instead of accompanying her there, he wandered off down the street in search of a CD store. As he strolled down the street, he began to notice everything getting quiet. After this, he noticed a van that looked like it was from the 1950s that honked and swerved around him. At this moment, he realized that he was somehow standing in the middle of the street and that everyone around him was dressed in 50s styled clothing. Like anyone would be in this situation, he was super confused, and he went to head back to the bookstore where he had left his wife, but when he turned around, the bookstore didn't even exist anymore. Where the bookstore was a minute ago was now a women's clothing store, and as soon as he did, it turned back into the bookshop he had initially left his wife in. He was back in 1996 and could not figure out what the heck had just happened to him. After this whole ordeal, he also learned that the clothing store he had seen and gone into hadn't existed since the 1950s either. Whether this is a real time travel story or there's some sort of other explanation behind it, that poor man was probably absolutely terrified. In our number 8 spot today, we have Hutton and Brandt. In 1932, journalist J. Bernard Hutton and photographer Joachim Brandt were sent by the German newspaper to the Hamburg shipyard in order to do a story. Everything was going fine and well and normal and honestly kind of uneventful until things took a large, crazy turn. Both Hutton and Brandt realized that they were caught in an air raid and had bombs raining down around them. Brandt, like the dedicated photographer he was, snapped a few photos, but the pair quickly evacuated the area to get to safety. When they returned to central Hamburg all shaken up, no one believed their story at all. They got the photos developed in order to show their proof, but to their surprise, the photos showed no such thing that would suggest the story they were telling. With no evidence and no one around who would believe them, the pair had no choice but to just go on living their lives. 11 years later, however, Hutton was living in London and he opened up the newspaper one day to see what he never expected. The newspaper that day detailed the story of Operation Gomorrah, which was an air raid on Hamburg, and the photos in the paper looked exactly like what he had experienced 11 years earlier. Did these two somehow end up getting teleported to a time 11 years later while they were out doing that story that day? I truly don't know what other kinds of explanations there could be. In our number 7 spot today, we have Live Your Lie. A guy on TikTok who goes by the username Live Your Lie has begun to post videos claiming that he is a time traveler from the year 3036, and he offers his warnings to all of us. He tells his followers that they are as free as they will ever be right now, and that our kids won't even see freedom. He says, "So suck it up, because as simple-minded as your time period is, you got it pretty good, you just don't know it." Okay, Mr. Live Your Lie, don't absolutely roast us all. Anyway, when asked about the world population in his year, he says it's just over 2 billion people. He talks about something called the Big Blackout, which he says happens in December of 2052. He says that the Big Blackout is when basically everything goes dark for upwards of 5 years. The internet, the power, it all gets disconnected on account of what's called the terrors, but many speculate otherwise. He says that during these years there's riots, turmoil, and that it's just the worst of times, and that it takes 20 years for things to get fully back online. He also adds that in the year 3036 we still have zoos, but all of the largest animals are gone, so the zoos then actually just consist of animals like dogs and cats. I'm honestly not sure what to make of this one. Like, if he really is a time traveler, I appreciate the heads up on what's to come, but couldn't he have also said like one nice thing about the future? Also, if time travel exists in 3036, why doesn't everyone just head back in time to when things were good? I don't know, maybe there's some sort of reason, or maybe he's lying. I guess one day someone will find out for sure. In our number 6 spot today we have Sir Victor Goddard. In 1935, when Air Marshal Sir Victor Goddard was still a wing commander, he was instructed to head over to an airbase that was located in Drem, Scotland that was inactive at the moment. As he flew over the base, he noticed it was in pretty terrible condition and that cattle had now begun grazing through the grass that found its way through the tarmac. Later on, as he was still flying, he found himself in a bit of a bad spot due to terrible weather conditions. To avoid anything bad happening, he decided to land at this inactive airbase and wait out the bad weather. What's weird, however, is as he got close to the base, the torrential downpour abruptly stopped and the sky very suddenly opened up with bright sun shining down. This was weird but not totally unexplainable, but what was unexplainable is that the inactive airbase could now be seen in full use and full of mechanics in blue overalls working on yellow planes. This was weird for a number of reasons. Firstly, he had just seen the base and it was not even close to looking like this, so how could this all have just come out of nowhere? The mechanics weren't wearing their khaki colored uniforms that were the norm then, and the Air Force didn't use yellow planes, they instead painted all of their planes silver, and there was one plane there that he wasn't able to identify or recognize. Sir Goddard left the situation completely confused and shocked, but that shock only got worse 4 years later when he visited Drem again. After the years that had passed, when he visited again, he saw the exact same scene he had seen 4 years before, like a full deja vu moment. Did he get confused on that day 4 years earlier? Did he fly into the future? Was this some sort of a Flight 828 situation? Unfortunately, there's a good chance we may never know for sure what really happened. In our number 5 spot today we have time travel _0. Okay, so this is one that at the time was both one of the most famous and one of the most believed cases around. In the year 2000, an online thread began about time travel paradoxes on a forum for the Time Travel Institute. On the thread, a user commented on how a time machine could theoretically be made, and this prompted the response of a user whose screen name was time travel _0, and they said, "Wow, Paul is right on the money. I was just about to give up hope on anyone knowing who Tipler or Kerr was on this word line. By the way, number 2 is the correct answer, and the basics for time travel start at CERN in about a year and end in 2034 with the first time machines built by GE. Too bad we can't post pictures, or I'd show it to you." Okay, so this is obviously insinuating that whoever the heck time travel _0 is a time traveler. Throughout the next year, people continued to post questions and messages they had for this guy on that thread, and throughout time, time travel _0 became known as John Titor, and he told us all his story in great detail. He said that he had been sent back to 1975 in order to bring an IBM 5100 computer to his own time, but he was just stopping into 2000 for a brief rest on his way back home. I guess time travel is exhausting? I personally would not know. He said that the reason for the mission to get the computer was because he needed it to debug various legacy computer programs in 2036 in order to combat a known problem where UNIX was going to have a problem in 2038, similar to what people thought was going to happen in the changeover from 1999 to 2000. There definitely are people out there who still believe that John was a real time traveler, so I guess I'll just leave this one up to you to decide. In our number 4 spot today we have the time traveling hipster. This photo appeared on the Virtual Museum of Canada website and it was originally taken in 1941. The photo is said to have been taken at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Goldbridge, British Columbia, Canada. At a first glance, this photo is just normal and that story sounds perfectly reasonable, but once we take a closer look, it is clear why this photo went viral. There's that one guy in it who isn't dressed similarly to anyone else in the photo. While someone with their own unique personal style isn't exactly an anomaly, anomaly, it certainly is very weird and suspicious that he seems like he could be from our current times, which is exactly why he has been dubbed the time-traveling hipster. It appears as though he is wearing a more modern style of sunglasses, some sort of printed t-shirt with a cardigan over top, and it even looks like he is holding some sort of compact camera that wasn't exactly widespread in the 1940s. Maybe the time-traveling hipster really is just that, or maybe he really just was a guy from 1941 who walked off the beaten path so that hipsters today could run. I'm not really sure what to make of this one, to be honest. In our number 3 spot today we have Andrew Carlson. On January 28, 2003, Andrew Carlson was arrested and held by the police for insider trading at Wall Street. This was because of the fact that in 2 weeks, through the stock market, Andrew was able to go from having $800 to making $350 million. Yep, $350 million in 2 weeks. That is absolutely insane. When the authorities arrested him, they assumed he made his profits through obtaining illegal insider trading information, but when they asked him how he was able to do this, Andrew said that he was actually from the year 2256, and so he knew exactly how all of the stocks were going to perform. Obviously, no one believed this story and just assumed he was telling an extremely far-fetched lie, which in circumstances like this would seem like a pretty safe assumption. But get this, when Andrew was released on bail, he totally disappeared, and despite several attempts to find him, no one has ever been able to locate him. To make matters even a little wilder, it is said that he was also able to accurately predict the exact date of the US invasion of Iraq. Not sure how, but that's what the internet tells me. In our number 2 spot today we have Edward. Edward is a man who has claimed that he has proof of the apocalypse, and he even brings photos along to prove it. Edward first appeared on Apex TV, which I'll be the first to admit hasn't exactly been a source of credible information, but who knows, maybe this is the time that they got it right. Edward claims that he was part of a top secret program in 2004 and that he was chosen to time travel to the year 5000. This photo I just talked about is a photo that Edward carries that shows Los Angeles completely underwater. In fact, Edward says that in the year 5000 the entire world is underwater, but humans have found a way to live on the water. He claims it happened because of global warming and explained that there was just too much CO2 in the air, which step by step destructed the natural shield zone. I'm not a Photoshop expert, so I wouldn't even know what to look for while looking at these photos he claims to have taken in the year 5000, so you guys let me know, you Photoshop experts watching this. In our number 1 spot today we have Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, before I started making this list I was not convinced that time travel would be a possibility, but after making this list, I think I might be convinced that Edgar Allan Poe is a time traveler. Seriously, just hear me out on this one. There are 2 main examples why, and I'm gonna do my best to keep them concise. So firstly, Poe's only completed novel was published in 1838, and it tells the tale of mutiny on a whaling ship lost at sea. The men on the ship realize that they need to resort to some extreme measures in order to stay alive, so they begin drawing straws to see who they're going to sacrifice for food. A boy named Richard Parker drew the shortest straw, and therefore he became the next meal. Okay, so let's fast forward 46 years to 1884, and in real life there are now 4 men who have been set adrift after the sinking of a yacht. These men found themselves in a similar predicament to the novels, and I kid you not, they ended up taking the same route and elected to take the life of and then eat a cabin boy. The cabin boy's name? Richard Parker. Not convinced yet? Well, what if I told you that he accurately predicted a scientific advancement before it was even known by, well, scientists? In 1840, Poe penned the gruesome story The Businessman, in which the narrator suffers a traumatic head injury as a child and later lives a violent life. The weird thing about this story is that he was able to grasp frontal lobe injury so well before it was even a thing that was able to be greatly studied, as the first time behavioral changes caused by this kind of injury were able to be studied didn't come until 1848. An actual neurologist, Eric Altschuler, wrote, "There's a dozen symptoms and he knows every single one. There's everything in that story, we've hardly learned anything more. It's so exact that it's just weird. It's like he had a time machine." Maybe I didn't convince you, but I'm not gonna lie, this convinced me.
Number 10. Sir Victor Goddard. This story really freaks me out. Sir Victor Goddard was a wing commander in 1935 and he was making a trip over to an airbase in Drem, Scotland. Little did he know that this routine trip would change his life forever. As he was flying over the base, he took in the rough condition it was in. The fields were unkept with grass cracking through the tarmac and cattle had begun invading to graze. Then suddenly the weather took a miserable turn and in order to prevent an accident, he decided to make for a landing at the base. But as he got closer and closer to landing, the rain began to let up and the sun broke through the clouds. Suddenly he saw a flurry of mechanics in clean and tidy blue uniforms working diligently on yellow planes. Usually the mechanics at the time formerly wore khaki uniforms, so the blue was a bit of a shock. Additionally, they were working on yellow planes instead of silver. Goddard left shaking his head to remove whatever fever dream he was having, only to revisit the exact moment when he visited the site again 4 years later. He saw the exact same thing, blue uniforms, yellow planes, and had to deal with quite a fierce bit of deja vu. Ever since this story came to light, it's not hard to believe he traveled into the future. Or back in time. Number 9. Greta Thunberg's doppelganger. What doesn't this girl do? First, she takes on the world's global environmental issues, gaining recognition on like every media outlet, and now she may be a time traveler. Social media blew up with the time travel theories when a 19th century photo surfaced that features Greta, or at least someone who looks just like her. It's true, the resemblance is astounding, so is this a case of time traveling, adventures, or just a common gene pool? Well, firstly, the situation of the photo doesn't actually suit Thunberg's environmental initiatives. The photo was taken in 1898, and the 3 children featured in it are sifting for gold, like Greta would ever be seen next to a mine. According to the University of Washington Libraries, the photo was also taken in the Canadian Yukon Territory. Far from Greta. Greta hasn't responded to the fanatics obsessed with the photo, and her silence only feeds the theories. Who knows? Maybe she just has one of those faces, or maybe she was sent back to do more of her research. After all, Greta does seem to prove time and time again that she isn't your average teen. Number 8. A mummy loves some Adidas. Discovering a mummy is a pretty big deal in itself, but discovering one with some pretty sweet kicks? One of the most unique and oldest pairs of shoes were discovered when a Mongolian mummy was unearthed. Her body was found in the Altai Mountains in Mongolia, and on her feet were a peculiar pair of shoes. They looked like trendy Adidas shoes. Now they aren't actually Adidas, but they do feature the signature striped style of the shoe. After the restoration, it was revealed that they were actually a pair of knee-high boots with a striped black and red pattern. They also featured decorated buckles and leather soles. Our ancient fashionista also carried with her a clutch bag, mirror, comb, a knife, and a saddle with the remains of a horse. So lots to do. Researchers estimate that she died due to a blow to the head. Interesting. I know, this may have taken the wind out of your sails, but considering they appear so similar to today's designs, could it be that she might have gotten her inspiration from a distant traveler? A traveler who sported remarkable striped leather shoes and inspired the 1,000-year-old seamstress? Number 7. The Philadelphia Survivor. The Philadelphia experiment is perhaps one of the most famous urban legends slash conspiracy theories slash actual historical event. For context, the Philadelphia experiment is an alleged military experiment that was carried out by the US Navy. In 1943, the USS Eldridge allegedly was made invisible and teleported from Pennsylvania to Virginia, either through time or parallel universe. What's the difference really? The story actually originated in 1955 when ex-merchant marine Carl M. Allen claimed to witness the event. He sent a book full of handwritten annotations to prove it, though it might be a hoax. Who knows? Did this actually happen? Who knows? But the movie definitely did, and it did nothing to help the conspiracy theories circling the world. But a man named Alfred Bielek found the film incredibly life-changing, as while watching it, he realized who he actually was, the lone survivor of the experiment. After seeing the 1988 film, Bielek's memories came flooding back, and he was actually Ed Cameron, and he had been born in 1916. So if this was real, it ticks all the boxes. Parallel universes, time travel, aliens, Philadelphia, science. Number 6. The Missing Hotel. This one gives me like Howl's Moving Castle vibes. Could be because I watched it recently for like the 12th time, so I don't know. But a building that's there 1 minute and then gone the next? I don't know. A couple traveling Europe had a unique experience, one they will never forget despite history seeming to. This story was featured on a TV series called Strange But True. 2 couples headed off to Spain in the 1970s to live their best lives, but time travel wasn't on the itinerary. They were on their way from England, passing through France when they decided to stop and search for accommodations. Everywhere in Montelimar was packed save one place that was simply labeled hotel. They got a room that was tremendously old-fashioned with no glass in the windows and no phone. But it was the breakfast that next morning that shocked them. The other guests were dressed in like outdated clothing, and their breakfast only came out to 19 francs, like, which was way lower than what they thought. Hey, that's a win. They took tons of pictures of the vintage hotel and planned on returning next time they were in Europe. But the hotel disappeared. When they looked for the hotel again, it was no longer there, and no locals knew what the heck they were talking about. Even eerier, their photographs did not develop, like it had all been a glitch. Number 5, the bridge opening. Next up, we have this picture. See if you can spot the one who is out of place. Found him? In case you missed it, we are talking about the gent dressed in the all too familiar type of like hipster style. He sticks out like a sore thumb with his thick black glasses, graphic t-shirt, and what looks to be some kind of hooded cardigan. This photo blew up across time travel enthusiast forums, like he's the ultimate hipster. The location of the photo was at the reopening of the Southport Bridge in Goldbridge, British Columbia in 1941. He also looks to be the youngest guy in the photo. Strange considering he would have been enlisted in the Canadian Army at that point. Correct me if I'm wrong. So why is such a young circa 2010 sporting gent standing at the Southport Bridge? Could it be he was sent back to document the event and was accidentally documented himself? Number 4, Andrew Carlson. This next one is for all my Game Stoppers out there who love that Robin Hood story. I did too. I really did. It sounds like Andrew Carlson pulled a Biff from Back to the Future though. Police arrested the 44-year-old in 2003 when he was somehow able to turn $800 into $350 million over 2 weeks. Like, that's the damn dream, man. Authorities believe that he must have had insider help, which according to Andrew wasn't exactly untrue. Andrew told the court that he was actually a time traveler from the year 2256, and that is how he knew. Obviously, who the heck would believe that ridiculous excuse? But wait, it gets weirder. Andrew disappeared without a trace. A month later, a mysterious benefactor paid $1 million buyout to get him out. On April 2nd, Andrew was supposed to meet with his lawyer, but he had entirely disappeared without a trace. No evidence of his existence could be found before the year 2002. Andrew, can you come back and just tell me how you did that? That'd be great, you know? Anyways, number 3, put your phone away. When I go to my next concert, there is one thing I really hope I don't see. People watching like the whole thing through their phones while they're at a live concert. It just bothers me so much. Like, maybe do it once to commemorate it, but not the entire time, my dude, you know? Someone should have said that to this time traveler in the background of Mike Tyson's 1994 match with Peter McNeely. Check this out. Yup, right in the background is a smartphone, obviously, right? I still remember my mom having like a tiny screen dial phone well into like 2001. There was no way what looks to be a Galaxy phone would be around back then. Debunk this photo if you want, but if that is indeed a time traveler who was sent back, dude, time and place. Number 2, the Nazca astronaut. Out of all the items on this list, this is the largest example of time travel in history by sheer size. The Nazca lines are located 250 miles south of Lima, Peru, and feature over 70 massive depictions of animals that can only be seen from the sky. But the one we are talking about is definitely either a sign for aliens or time travel. Among the 70 images, there's a strange humanoid figure that looks remarkably similar to an astronaut. Some of the designs from the geoglyphs measure around 30 miles, and experts have no idea how or why these drawings were created with such precision. The astronaut is the strangest of them all. It kind of looks like not only an astronaut, but it looks like it's waving, you know? Weird. Was this an homage to a strange spaceman who came traveling and visited the people of Peru? I personally wouldn't be surprised. And last but not least, Edgar Allan Poe. This last and final one, I have to thank Olivia for like helping me dive down this rabbit hole because it really is convincing. I'm fully on board. So is she. So here we go. Edgar Allan Poe has to have been a time traveler, or maybe he still is. Either way, he must have had some sixth sense. Okay, so first off, he predicted the future. 46 years after Edgar published his first novel called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket in 1838, something weird happened. At one point in the book, their ship, Grampus, became stranded without food or water after a mutiny and must resort to desperate measures. The crew draws straws to see who would be sacrificed for sustenance. A boy named Richard Parker lost the deal. 46 years later, in 1884, the exact thing happens with the exception that the boat was a sinking yacht. 4 men were set adrift and forced to do the same thing, and guess the name of the boy who died! Richard Parker. Example 1. Example 2, 1840. Poe penned the story called The Businessman Who Endures a Violent Life After a Head Injury. He was hit in the head as a young kid, causing an injury to his frontal lobe, which Poe seemed to entirely understand in intricate detail. But the first time behavioral changes caused by this kind of injury were able to be studied didn't come until 1848. An actual neurologist, Eric Altschuler, wrote, and I quote, "There's dozens of symptoms and he knows every single one. There's everything in that story, we've hardly learned anything more. It's so exact that it's just weird, and it's like he had a time machine." Unquote. Point 3. Who is the figure who visits Poe's grave every year and puts a rose on it? Perhaps Poe is coming back to honor a past life. After all, why is a raven like a writing desk? Because Poe wrote on both.